female TV journalist is left, and I quote, uncomfortable after an interview with a raging Prime Minister. Take a listen.
He was absolutely furious with me. It was really uncomfortable.
It's extraordinary. I'll be lifting the lid on the real Keir Starmer at 10 o'clock. What I found may shock you. And all evening reaction from my top panel. Let me tell you, if this guy was Labour leader, I'd be voting Labour. Former Labour Special Advisor Paul Richards. He's a wise man, put him in charge. Editor-at-large of the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths. And political commentator, former political editor of LBC, no less, Theo Usherwood. Now, this show has a golden rule. We don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. I'll be proving that over the next 2 hours. Keir Starmer in my take at 10. Unmissable box office telly. But next up, are the Tories in denial about Nigel Farage? First, the news headlines and Sophia Wensler.
Mark, thank you. Good evening. It's just gone 9 o'clock. These are your headlines. Rishi Sunak has addressed the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham for the last time as party leader. The former Prime Minister apologised for the general election loss and joked about Sir Keir Starmer's ongoing gifting controversy.
It's such a hot ticket, I'm surprised that Keir Starmer hasn't asked somebody to buy him one. Now, I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you for everything that you do for our party and the support that you've always given Uchler and me. You all worked tirelessly during the election campaign, and I'm only sorry that I could not deliver the result that your efforts deserved. And as you know, this is my final conference as leader. A new leader of our party will be announced in just 5 weeks' time.
Earlier, the conference kicked off with Tory leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick criticising rival Kemi Badenoch for saying maternity pay is excessive. Speaking to Times Radio, Kemi Badenoch said maternity pay has gone too far and the government needed to interfere less in people's lives. Mr Jenrick responded to the comments, saying that the party should be firmly on the side of parents. Following backlash, Ms Badenoch later said on X, contrary to what some have said, she does support maternity pay. And all the leadership hopefuls, including James Cleverly, Robert Jenrick, Tom Tugendhat and Kemi Badenoch, will be making their case to be the next leader of the party. Now, in other news, Israel says it has carried out large-scale airstrikes against Houthi terrorists in Yemen. The latest strikes come as Israel carried out more attacks across Lebanon and Hezbollah fired more rockets into northern Israel. Yesterday, the terrorist group confirmed their leader, Hassan Nasrallah, was killed in airstrikes in southern Lebanon. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel settled the score with Nasrallah's death. To Austrian politics now, where early projections are showing the right-leaning Freedom Party is set to finish first in the Austrian general election. The party, led by Herbert Kickl, has promised Austrians to build Fortress Austria to restore their security, prosperity and peace. The right-leaning group is expected to be in pole position to form a coalition for the first time since the Second World War. And finally, Philip Schofield says the utter betrayal by his television colleagues has made him never want to be a daytime presenter ever again. The 62-year-old is set to appear on Channel 5's Castaway, marking his first TV appearance since leaving ITV in May of 2023, following an admission of an unwise but not illegal affair with a younger male colleague. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Mark.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, folks. In my take at 10, a top female journalist is left uncomfortable after an interview with a raging Prime Minister. I'll be lifting the lid on the real Keir Starmer at 10 o'clock. What I found may shock you. Plus, Should integration and learning the language be a condition of British citizenship? A very busy 2 hours to come. Starmer at 10, but first, my big opinion. The Conservatives, remember them? Well, they gather in Birmingham this weekend, and they'll be talking about Badenoch and Jenrick, Tugendhat and Cleverly. Truss's name might come up. Sunak, perhaps. God forbid, Theresa May might get a mention. Boris, too, making headlines at the moment with his tell-all book, will no doubt be a hot topic of conversation. But as they reflect on the historic disaster that was their performance on the 4th of July, having forgotten that they are called the Conservative Party and therefore should perhaps act accordingly, there is one name more significant, more consequential, more existential to the Tories than any other. Someone not even in the party, but one who threatens to destroy it. One Nigel Paul Farage, the leader of Reform UK. Now, this is a man who you underestimate at your peril. He battled from within in Brussels, ultimately prevailing as we left the European Union. Brexit would simply not have happened in the absence of this man. He has spearheaded a broadcasting revolution here at GB News that I'm proud to be part of. He has unearthed the outrageous debanking scandal, leading to the resignation of one of the biggest names in finance. He became leader of Reform UK about 10 minutes before the election. No leaflets, no posters, no budget, barely enough candidates, and yet he wins 5 seats, including one for himself in Clacton, and achieves the small matter of 4.1 million votes, dwarfing the popular support enjoyed by the Liberal Democrats, who have been around in various forms for over 100 years. So when Nigel Farage has a plan, he sticks to it, and it tends to happen. His latest plan is to overtake the Tories. However, Reform's chairman, Zia Youssef, is aiming even higher, suggesting that Reform UK can win, that's right, win the next election, and Nigel Farage can be installed as Prime Minister. Now, while I mention Zia Youssef, as a treat, because it's Sunday night, would you like me to show you that delicious clip of BBC Question Time host Fiona Bruce correcting Youssef when he suggested that Britain takes in more asylum seekers than the likes of France, and then having to correct herself? It's classic BBC. It is a thing of beauty. Take a listen.
France does take more per capita in terms of asylum seekers than we do. I think Germany might as well, but France takes more per capita. We are quite far down the list.
Can I just come in for a second?
No, let me just... Actually, before we move on, I just want to say, Zia, you are right, in fact, that France takes fewer asylum seekers per capita than the United Kingdom. We take more than that. It's important to get that right.
LOL! Classic BBC. That's what you're paying for, folks. You see, these Reform characters, love them or hate them, often win the arguments and often have the last laugh. And Farage is now laughing at a Conservative Party who he might have joined a few months ago if they'd been smart enough to bring him into what they claim to be a broad political church. But the complacency of this party, who will tell you ad nauseam that they're the most successful political movement in the history of Western democracy, knows no bounds. But pride comes before a fall. Farage helped the Tories in 2019 by standing down candidates in marginal seats, paving the way for Boris Johnson's landslide. It meant keeping Jeremy Corbyn out of number 10 and getting Brexit done. But did the Conservatives reach out to Nigel afterwards to thank him, to give him a job, to drag him into the bosom of their organisation? Far from it. He was out in the cold, and they will rue the day that that happened. The best they can hope for now is to have a friendly and constructive relationship with Farage and Reform, because the genie is out of the lamp. It ain't going back in. Based upon a platform of stopping the boats, massively reducing legal migration, ending wokery and dialing back on net zero, Reform UK have quite simply out-Toryed the Tories. So their little conference this week in Birmingham is starting to look like a deck chair rearranging exercise on the Titanic. Whoever wins the leadership is going to have to embrace Nigel Farage and Reform UK. They're going to have to collaborate, to reach out, to work together, because a bloody battle between the two parties of the right in this country only guarantees a decade of Labour in power. But the ball is in the Conservatives' court now. It's up to them to do the running. This is a crisis of their own making. Yes, the Reform leader has casually stepped into the space vacated by the Tories with a pint in one hand and a fag in the other. The Conservatives will be up there tonight in Birmingham, on the dance floor, in the hall, in the local bars. But the elephant in the room is Nigel Farage. What a bunch of dumbos they are. Tusk, tusk. Your reaction, gbnews.com/your say. Don't forget, I'll be dealing with Sir Keir Starmer at 10 o'clock. A shocking tape that reveals how he made a senior leading TV journalist feel uncomfortable. The real Starmer unmasked at 10. But first, reaction to my big opinion. Well, I'm delighted to welcome former Labour Special Advisor Paul Richards, Editor-at-Large of the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, and political commentator, and let me tell you, former political editor of LBC Radio, Theo Usherwood. Great to see all three of you. Charlotte, welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. First of many appearances, I'm sure.
Oh, thanks.
The Tories are in denial, aren't they?
I think they should invite Nigel Farage along. You keep saying he's the elephant in the room. I think he should be in the room. They can put on some milkshakes for him, a few pints, get the Marlborough Lights laid out. Because, you know, there is some talk of a non-aggression pact, isn't there? And I think it's probably a good idea. And also for Farage as well, because he'll probably get obliterated in 5 years. Because without the protest votes, he's not going to get those numbers, those 4 million type numbers.
Do you think?
They might as well just be friends and have a few pints together.
I would go the other way. I wonder whether public dissatisfaction with the illegal migrant crossings and also legal net migration, which I'm sure will still be high in 5 years' time, might double Farage's vote. Don't you see Farage as an existential threat to the Tories?
I don't really see him as an existential threat to the Tories. I think they're right to do a non-aggression pact and bring him in because I think, you know, probably the next leader, of course, will tackle immigration. It'll be their number one sort of calling card, won't it? So, you know...
But would Nigel grant them any largesse when it comes to, like, a pact or a deal of any sort? Farage owes the Tories nothing, and it's my reading of the situation that he quite resents them now and wants to take them down.
Yeah, I mean, he has actually denied it in the papers today, but there are these whispers that are quite persistent. But I think in 5 years' time, I honestly think the protest vote will have disappeared, and he will need them a little bit.
This is a bombshell for a brand new star on Mark Dolan tonight. Are you telling me that Reform UK and Nigel Farage have peaked?
I mean, you're not going to like this. I think they might have done.
I'm open to anything.
Well, I think they might have done.
Well, listen, Paul, you're loving every moment of this because this is two parties of the right tearing each other to bits.
I mean, there is an argument that says Reform delivered the Labour majority. Certainly, I think 80 seats where they took enough votes off the Conservatives to allow the candidate of the Labour Party over the line. And there are lots of Labour candidates who won with very small majorities, you know, 500, one I met the other day, 15.
Crumbs.
So,
That's living dangerously,
isn't
it?
Isn't it just? So, yeah, if a bloc within our political system is split like this, and traditionally it's been the Liberal-Labour bloc,
right.
Now it's the right-wing bloc, then that's what happens, is the other party gets in.
Labour don't have anything like that kind of issue, do they? Because I think that the Lib Dems and Labour are quite a different proposition for the electorate. Labour appear to have a sort of unassailable position on the left, whereas now the right seems very split.
Yes, I mean, we will talk about Starmer in due course, but his triumph over the last 5 years is to create a Labour Party capable of winning this size of majority, and he's got a hegemonic sort of sway over the left now, and that's incredible achievement from, let's not forget, the massive defeat of only 2019.
Theo, Reform UK is a monster of the Conservatives' making, isn't it?
Yes, in large part I would agree with that analysis. I think the other problem for the Conservatives in talking of a pact or some sort of non-aggression agreement, the problem is that Nigel Farage isn't a team player. And I say that almost as a compliment. I mean, he draws in all of the political energy, all of the political, the story, if you like, is always about Nigel Farage. And I think ultimately for the Conservative Party, that's too much to bear. They can't hold that burden, so that if Nigel Farage becomes leader or he becomes the main figurehead of the right, then the Conservative Party won't be able to play second fiddle to that. And ultimately, I think that's the problem. The other issue is that he hates the Tories. He absolutely loathes the Tories.
There was an opportunity for some kind of coming together actually about a year ago at Tory party conference when he was in attendance, wasn't he, unofficially, and got applause wherever he went. I think he was with Priti Patel. I think he went to one of the parties, he was dancing. So that was the moment when the Tories might have brought him in. Should they have?
I think they would look back at the decision to call that summer election and think to themselves that was probably unwise, because what when Rishi Sunak made that decision, he seemed to make that decision on the back of economic data. In actual fact, would they have been perhaps wise to let Nigel Farage get drawn into the American elections? Trump could have done very well, called an election late in November, December, with and betting on the fact that Trump wins the presidential election, and then Nigel Farage goes off to America, and then they'd have had a much better chance.
Yep, Paul.
And just being nerdish for a moment, of course, first past the post.
Evening, if you like.
First past the post system we have in the UK means it's very hard for very small parties to break through decisively. They can pick up, the anti-Israel 5, the Green Party, the Reform. They've got these little blocks of 4 or 5 MPs, but I mean, you're not going to get the 300 odd that you need to win under first past the post.
Nigel Farage is entitled to detest the Tories. They've treated him very badly. He got no thanks for his intervention in 2019, standing down candidates in marginal seats, thereby helping Boris win. He got nothing. I don't think he got so much as a thank you.
I mean, his triumph, I suppose, is that the Conservative Party is now attacking to the right because they believe there is this sort of voice out there that they need to appeal to, the voice of the voters. But I'm not sure that will come onto this too when we think about the leadership
briefly,
context.
Charlotte Griffiths' bombshell suggestion that Reform UK have already peaked.
I'm not sure they have peaked. I think the problem is that I think this will depend on whether Keir Starmer can be successsul. If Keir Starmer can deal with things like illegal immigration, the boats, the small boats, then I think, the goose of Nigel Farage may well be cooked. But
crumbs.
I think if he fails to deal with those key issues, if he fails to get NHS waiting lists down, if he fails to get people feeling that little bit better off and a little bit happier in the economy, then I think Nigel Farage has some way to go yet.
His goose may be cooked, or it could be water off a duck's back. Listen, we'll be dealing with the Prime Minister in a special take at 10. The mask slips. You won't want to miss it. But next up, the weather is turning. The nights are drawing in, and you still have plenty of time to grab an autumn cash boost of an incredible £36,000 in cash. It is the biggest cash prize of the year so far, and it could be yours. Here are the details.
On demand. Good luck.
Next up in the big story, which of the Conservative leadership candidates do Labour most fear? I'll be asking Tory legend Edwina Currie next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Earlier this week, Olympic swimmer Adam Peaty finally proposed to his girlfriend, because I've been waiting for this, the daughter of Gordon Ramsay, with a gorgeous yellow diamond ring.
Yeah, so the demand for coloured diamonds in the last 10 years has soared by, guess how much, 77% between 2010 and 2019. Joining us now to tell us more about some of the hottest trends in the diamond world is dealer to the stars, Neil Dutson. Good morning, Neil.
Morning, Ben.
And I've got one of your exemplary examples. Look at this bad boy.
So that's a very rare Muso Colombian emerald. And it's alpine green translucent, so it's a really stunning
See if we get a close-up.
So pretty impressive.
Can I be very crude and ask how much this is worth?
So value is £200,000.
How much, sorry?
£200,000. Now, the reason is its rarity. It's minor oiling. It's very, very, very pretty. The two diamonds on the side are D-colour, flawless diamonds, just to accentuate the setting.
Neil, how did you get into diamonds?
I studied diamonds in Antwerp. So Antwerp used to be the diamond capital of the world, really. Yeah. 85% of the world's diamonds go through Antwerp, or used to. And now Dubai has taken over. I just went to a school there. I learnt about diamonds, and I just didn't want to be seen off in the future.
Neil, I'm very concerned I'm going to drop 200 grand's worth of diamonds into my cup of tea, so can I give that back to you?
Absolutely.
But I can hold one if you like.
Oh, well, I've got a lovely one here.
Thank you.
So this is a fancy vivid yellow. It's 8 carats.
This is my dream ring, just so you know, for this hand. This would be amazing. So what would I call this? A yellow?
So that's a natural fancy vivid yellow diamond. Value £300,000. So.
It fits
depends
like
where you're buying it from.
It fits like a glove, Neil. Maybe it's a sign it's meant to be mine.
Definitely a sign, yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
The king of breakfast TV is back. That's right. Britain's favourite TV host, Eamon Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
And don't forget, I'll be dealing with Sir Keir Starmer in no uncertain terms in my take at 10. A senior television journalist made uncomfortable by a raging Starmer. The mask has slipped. It's a take at 10 that you won't want to miss. But listen, a big reaction to my big opinion. The Tories have done good things, but they're in denial. They're up there in Birmingham. They don't realise the elephant in the room is Nigel Farage. Why aren't they talking about that? This from David. Farage does not hate the Tories. He used to be a member. He's just exposed them for what they are, liberals. I think reform will take more Labour voters next time, says Catherine. Lots of people I know have said they will never vote Labour again. How about this from Sylvie? Charlotte Griffiths hopes that reform have peaked. Can't have more than 4 million of the great unwashed daring to be heard, can we? There you go. Listen, I love getting your messages. Keep them coming. gbnews.com/your say. Time now for this. Yes, it's time for the big story. And as the Tory leadership hopefuls jockey for position, which of the candidates do Labour fear most? Let's ask former Conservative government minister, author and former 5 Live presenter Edwina Currie. Edwina, really good to see you again after far too long. Let's talk about the timeline first, if we can. Should the winner be revealed early, ahead of the October 31st budget?
Actually, I think that would be a very good idea. I think the idea of having Rishi Sunak having to oppose the budget is a bad notion. It was an idea that was suggested right at the start of this, these hustings, this contest. And I gather there was one of the 6 originally who said, oh, no, I wouldn't possibly be ready. And we don't know who that one is. Hoping that idiot's been eliminated already. It would be a very good idea. I think the membership is now getting quite impatient. We've all been to hustings. We've all joined in Zooms. A lot of them are at the party conference. We're all sharing opinions on who we think should be the next leader. And really, there's no point in any delay any longer, especially when you look at how unpopular the Labour government has managed to make itself in just a few weeks.
I completely agree. I think they're missing a sitter. It's an open goal, isn't it, Edwina? Now, it's going to go down to a short list of 2 to face the membership. Which 2 candidates would you like to see in a face-off?
It looks like a racing certainty that the 2 candidates will be Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch. And that gets really, really interesting because they are quite contrasting characters. I like the other 2, but I don't think they've got the personalities, really.
Yeah.
And Jenrick is pitching for the reform vote, not least because we know who they are. A lot of them are former Tory party members. But his one issue is immigration. And Kemi, on the other hand, is pitching a much more intellectual, much broader, much more thoughtful approach. Very, very interesting. I always feel like if I was at a dinner party, I'd shuffle away from Jenrick because he'd bore you rigid with his one subject. And Kemi, you would just kind of keep feeding lines to because she's so interesting. Now, here's the rub, in my opinion. If you just go for the reform vote by battering on about immigration, actually, Reform do immigration better than we do. And that what you're then ignoring is by far outnumbering the Reform vote, where the people who didn't vote at all I mean, in a constituency like in the High Peak, where I'm the president of the Conservatives, yes, the reform vote, or the version of it, went up from about 1,500 to 6,000. It went up by about 4,500. But 10,000 people did not turn out to vote compared with the previous election. So it way outnumbers. Plus, as we've just heard the hint, there's probably some disaffected Labour voters around. I mean, Labour has got itself to the stage where I think the latest poll said half of Britons say they are disappointed by what Labour have done in government so far, including a quarter of Labour voters. So there are millions of people there for us to win back, and we don't win them back by bashing on about one topic, especially when that one topic is immigration.
Edwina, you served under Margaret Thatcher. Does Kemi Badenoch have something of the Iron Lady about her?
Oh, she does. It's really quite sort of, sends little shivers up and down my back. It's wonderful. The slight difference is that actually Margaret learned after 20 years in Parliament to put across a case, a complex case, in very simple words that would appeal to everyone. Things like the state is our master. The state should be our servant, not our master. Very elegant. She had Robin Bell writing her speeches, and the people from Saatchi. They were very good indeed at turning what she wanted to say into elegant sound bites. Kemi is not quite there yet. Listening to Kemi is a bit like listening to a choo-choo train. You have to concentrate very hard, and I've got 2 degrees. Goodness knows what it sounds like to somebody, shall we say, a tad older than me.
Now, Edwina, I understand it was Timothy Bell, that wrote speeches for Margaret Thatcher. Of course, you'll remember that. You're part of that golden political era yourself. But let's talk about the Tories. Can the party change? And if so, what does that change look like?
Well, the Conservatives tend to win over a very long period of time because they suss out what most people want and need. The worries about inflation, for example, the worries about not having decent jobs. That's where the issue about immigration competing for jobs and probably bringing down the value of wages becomes an issue. Having a confidence in the future, having good investment, knowing that the business you're in or wherever you're working is excited and confident about how things are going to pan out, recommending to your kids that they go and work for this firm because it's a good firm, that sort of thing. We've always taken that sort of approach. And of course, what you actually then have to do varies from time to time, depending on the issues. What we've never been is a party of tin drum banging politicians with loads of policies and loads of dogma and all that. We leave that to the Labour Party, and particularly the left of the Labour Party. Corbynistas in mirror image, we are not. And I would like to hear a lot of careful thinking about how we go forward with that. David Cameron did it. He brought the party back from the brink. It's happened before. I think it can happen again. I tell you what the real problem also is that when we lost the election, we were expecting we were going to have, 10 years in opposition and plenty of time to do a lot of navel gazing and thinking about it. It's beginning to look like Keir Starmer's going to lose the next election, and we want to be in a position to win it. So much of our problem is now, do we choose a leader of the opposition or do we choose a future prime minister? I have no idea what the answer to that is.
What a cliffhanger. Edwina Currie, so good to see you again. We'll catch up soon. My thanks to former government minister and ex-5 Live presenter Edwina Currie. Now, next up, is leadership hopeful Kemi Badenoch right that not all cultures are equal and that integration and speaking the language should be a condition of British citizenship? That's next.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be turning increasingly unsettled as we go through this evening and overnight. Heavy spells of rain, but something a little bit drier as we go midweek. So we've got an area of low pressure that is going to bring in some strong gusty winds as well as heavy outbreaks of rain. There is a squeeze in those isobars as well. So there is a Met Office wind warning and also a rain warning that comes into force as we go overnight. So heavy spells of rain across southern counties into Wales and into the Midlands. Midlands. Cloudier skies further towards the north, still with some outbreaks of rain here. Lows of generally 10 or 11 degrees. Quite a mild start to Monday morning, but a damp start out there. Heavy spells of rain and still some strong winds, especially along the English Channel. And that heavy spell of rain will continue to push its way northwards, affecting southern parts of England into Wales as well. Northern Ireland also seeing a cloudy start with outbreaks of rain. Rain a bit patchier further the north you go across Scotland, and we may even see some brightness towards the far west. But really a messy picture out there on Monday morning. We have got various weather warnings in force for heavy spells of rain that could lead to disruption and also some flooding. So that rain stalls across northern parts of Wales and across the Midlands into parts of Lincolnshire and Yorkshire as well. Elsewhere, largely cloudy but turning drier towards the far south. Highs of up to 17 or 18 degrees. That low pressure system then moves its way eastwards. We'll still get a keen breeze down the northeast coast with showery outbreaks of rain here, but further the west you go, it should be largely a drier day with some sunny spells in store, and that sets the theme through Wednesday and Thursday, largely drier with some spells of sunshine, highs of up to 18 degrees.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Steve has messaged in gbnews.com/yoursay. Whoever wins the Tory leadership, the party is the same bunch of liberal wets. There you go. Edwina says, Neil, out of touch. Immigration is an important touchstone issue along with the economy. The ConLab Uniparty have failed on both counts. Now, Tory leadership hopeful Kemi Badenoch has said that not all cultures are valid when it comes to immigration, and that failing to recognise that is naive. She said that most politicians shy away from talking about immigration in terms of culture as opposed to economics, as they fear it's too controversial. She said the culture is more than cuisine or clothes, but is also customs, which may be at odds with British values. Writing for The Telegraph, she said, we cannot be naive and assume that immigrants will automatically abandon ancestral ethnic hostilities at the border, or that all cultures are equally valid. They are not. So should integration and speaking the language be a condition of citizenship? Theo?
So I think the problem, the tangle that Kemi Badenoch has got herself into with this one is it's not how the system is set up to run if we are going to be in the European Convention on Human Rights. It just isn't. I think she could run this argument and it would have legitimacy and there would have some logic and some coherence to it. But in order to get that, to be in that space, she has to then say this country is better off outside, not signing up to the ECHR. And if she does that, then the argument works. You can see the logic of it. But whilst we're signed up to the convention, I'm not making an argument one way or the other, by the way, as to we should be signed up or not. But whilst we're signed up to the convention, if you come to this country, you have a right to claim asylum in this country. That can be rejected or it can be accepted, but that's the premise. And your culture, whether you're from one culture or another, is neither here nor there. It is whether, if you are deported from this country to your country of origin, you're going to be tortured, you're at risk of being sentenced to a death penalty, and so forth. That's the basic premise.
But what's that got to do with learning the language and making an effort to integrate?
Well, I think that the point is that if you're in the Conservative Party, having had 14 years of trying to get the numbers down and failed miserably at getting the numbers down, then you've got to come up with a system that actually gets the numbers down. In order to do that, you either have to open up and allow people to claim asylum in this country, and that's what the Labour government is deciding to do, and that will come with its own political dangers as well, because we could see up to 100,000 potentially claim asylum in this country every year. When you compare that against the 29,000 who came to this country on a small boat last year, well, actually, it was higher, wasn't it? It was... well, it's 29,000, 45,000 the year before, I should say.
By the end
it was 45,000 the year before, and we're looking at going up to somewhere in the region of 30, 35,000 this year. Now, if you're actually going to have a mindset of trying to get that number down, then you are going to have to come up with an alternative system. And I don't see how these comments by Kemi Badenoch go any way to making that happen.
Interesting, because legally it just won't. It won't.
You
fly.
come out if she said, I'm all for it. If you not for it, but you know what I'm saying. The argument holds water if you say we're coming out of the Convention on Human Rights. If you're not prepared to say that, then this article in the Sunday Telegraph doesn't work.
Yes, indeed. Now, Charlotte, I've got plenty of viewers and listeners who would welcome the idea of learning the language and integrating as a condition of citizenship. Do you think that Kemi is right to open up this conversation?
Definitely, and I did a piece for the Mail on Sunday, actually last Sunday, and it's just a small example. Okay, so in NHS waiting rooms, if you're sort of waiting in a queue with a numbered ticketed system, sometimes they have queues with numbered ticketed systems. If you have a translator, you get to jump to the front of the queue, which is because the NHS has to save money on translation services. That's sort of fair enough, but it means actually everyone who doesn't speak English goes to the front of the queue, which is deeply unfair. That's just one small example, and I think there's a lot of examples like that going on, whether it's in the classroom and some children don't speak the language. You hear examples of teachers who send letters home to the parents can't read. I mean, this is unfair on the parents and the teachers. The system isn't set up for a language barrier, so it does need to be conditional, and I think Kemi's right to bring it up, and she also brought up a really good point in the op-ed in the Telegraph today, which is that recently, obviously, people use their phones a lot, so they use smartphones, so they're less likely to learn the English language because they're WhatsApping and on Instagram and on social media the whole time. So it's slowing down how quickly they learn the language, which is another really good point. All she's saying is we need a strategy. It's OK not to speak the language, but there needs to be a strategy.
We are. I mean, I wonder whether Labour would be wise, perhaps, to adopt a more hawkish approach to integration and language.
I can remember almost annual tradition of Labour ministers standing up and making a speech saying people need to learn English. And then
I think John Reid said it as Home Secretary.
John Reid said it, Hazel Blair said it, Ruth Kelly said it. It was a tradition. They would come and make that speech. And the argument was not about, you've got to be like us. It was more about saying you have to have full access to public services to integrate into the community, not be kept at home and not allowed out within the family setting, and to allow people into the jobs market. That was our argument. It's about inequality.
Well, I think it's an argument that still resonates. But next up, my Mark Needs guest is a Tory MP laughing off the threat of Nigel Farage. He joins me from Conservative Party conference in Birmingham. That's next.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Founded in 1990 in Knightsbridge in London, the Beverly Hills Bakery offers some of the finest American baked goods in the United Kingdom. Beverly Hills Bakery has delivered gifts to all the UK Prime Ministers of the last 20 years, with, I think, the exception of Sir Keir Starmer so far, and provided gifts for the royal family and for royal births. As we near the 35th anniversary of the bakery, I'm joined by the owner and head pastry chef, Rosa de Souza, and Manuel de Souza, who is the director of the Beverly Hills Bakery. How marvellous to see you both. Welcome to GB News.
Thank you for inviting us.
So, why has this formula worked? Why did London need a Beverly Hills Bakery?
What we do is we're a bakery, but underlying it's actually a gifting experience.
Right.
So this is an alternative to flowers. So in terms of concept, that has maintained its originality despite going on for 35 years. And in fact, what I do is I often ask myself, why is it going strong? To remind myself to focus on those things that we need to focus on.
So instead of sending a bunch of flowers, you send a beautiful box of cakes like that, or confection like that, complete with bunnies and so on.
Exactly. So you have the concept on the one hand, but you also need the quality of product that goes inside. And I think that's where Beverly Hills Bakery has got a great product.
And it's where Rosa comes in, isn't
Yes.
it?
Yes.
So when did you start to bake? Did you start to bake domestically in your home, and did it spread from there?
We started from home, my mother's baking, where we didn't have all the stoves and things like that. We baked on the charcoal, you know, like the grease.
Yes.
And we started baking. I learned from my mother the baking.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The mask has slipped. The real Keir Starmer in my take at 10. But listen, Kemi Badenoch has suggested that integration and the language should be a rule of citizenship. Adrian Porter says Badenoch is right. Guy says if mass migration in all its forms isn't stopped, Britain and its culture will be lost within a couple of decades. And how about this? Rick says immigration, legal and illegal, is bleeding this country dry. OK, folks, lots to get through. We'll start with this. Yes, indeed. I'm delighted to say it's time for Mark Meets. And I went to Birmingham. Well, I didn't actually, but virtually I did, to speak to a top Tory MP regarding conference and indeed the Tory leadership hopefuls. Shastri Hurst, Conservative MP for Solihull West and Shirley, welcome to the programme. What is this year's conference for?
Well, look, we've just come through one of the most bruising electoral defeats we've faced as a party. So this conference is an opportunity for our members to get together and look at the 4 candidates who are putting themselves forward for leadership of our party. And this is a debate that has really been taking place in Westminster so far. And we've now got a real opportunity to go out to members, go out to the public, and for the 4 leadership candidates to sell the reason why they're not just going to be the next leader of this party, but the next Prime Minister of this country.
Should the results of the contest be moved forward so the new leader can offer some accountability in regard to Labour's budget on the 31st of October?
I tend to be fairly rules-based. I was a lawyer prior to coming into politics, and we have set a time frame for the leadership election. That is the time frame that it's going to be run under. I don't think you can change the rules partway through a contest.
Now, you're backing Tom Tugendhat for the leadership. What has he got that the other candidates don't?
Look, for me, it's about, this election's all about leadership, and we know what happened in the last election. We lost because we lost the trust of the British people, and we lost that trust because we behaved at times abhorrently. Now, Tom's got a proven record of leadership over 25 years. Prior to coming into Parliament, he took the Queen's shilling wearing the uniform of the British Army. In Parliament, he served as an excellent chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, holding Russia, Tehran and China to account. And he's demonstrated as Security Minister that he is a man not just of words but of action. Under his tenure as Security Minister, more spies were arrested and charged than in the decade before. So I think that's precisely what we need as a party. It's the time to turn the page. It's a time for a new era for this party. And I think Tom's precisely the man to lead us into doing so.
although many take the view that Tom Tugendhat is a very centrist figure within the Conservative Party, how would he address the threat of Reform UK and the 4.1 million people that voted for Nigel Farage's party in July?
Look, I think this talk of being to the left of the party or the right of the party is deeply unhelpful. It's about dominating the common ground. That's where you win elections from. And what we do know is that we could get all those votes back from Reform. We'd still be short of having a majority of the next election. We need to have a wide range. That's getting the votes that we were lent to the Liberal Democrats and Labour at the last election, but also getting hold of those Reform voters and people who stayed at home. I think Tom is the candidate who has the broadest appeal. We've got polling that demonstrates that, both in terms of winning back votes from Lib Dems, as we've seen in lots of the south of the country, but also winning back those Reform votes. And his history of patriotism, his history of service, his history of duty, I think is a really powerful narrative.
How would Tom Tugendhat stop the boats?
Well, he's been very clear that there are a variety of routes that we need to be doing, including utilising the Royal Navy to turn back those boats, but having a stronger defence of our borders as well. But it's also part of a broader picture around migration and immigration in this country to ensure that we've got a thriving high net value economy and we don't sink to a lower value, low wage economy that currently is driving immigration.
Would Tom Tugendhat ditch the ECHR as a matter of policy?
Tom's been very clear and consistent on this point. So when he left the army in 2013, he wrote a policy paper on this. And he's been very clear this is an important document, but it was written some time ago. And it needs to reflect modern society. We've seen lots of nations do it already. So the first step is that we do derogation from certain clauses that aren't working for us. We need to look at reforming the ECHR. And ultimately, but it is an ultimate option, if things aren't working, then we have to consider that we leave it. But of course, Tom's position is that by derogation, which is opting out, and reform, we would hopefully be able to have a workable system with the ECHR.
Do you think that the Conservatives have to move their position on net zero, given the enormous costs to the economy and the doubt in some circles about whether it's even possible?
I think as a party, first of all, we need to regain the trust of the British people, because it's only then that we will be heard and the British people will be willing to listen to what we say. Look, we're some way away from an election now. We've just had one, so developing those policies over the next few years is going to be really important. But specifically in terms of net zero, we have to take a pragmatic approach to this. It's vitally important that we protect the environment for future generations. I'm the father of a young child. I want to make sure he's breathing clean air and living in a sustainable world. But we need to do it in a way that protects our businesses and protects our economy.
And which Reform UK policies do you personally disagree with, Neil?
Well, I have to say, it's very difficult to actually pin down a reform policy. They are, by definition, a protest organisation. They are disruptors. And they are effective in doing so, but they don't set out a policy platform.
Well, just to interrupt you, they're going to scrap...
And specifically how they're going to do it.
OK, just to interrupt you, they're going to scrap net zero altogether, which I think is a move that would be popular among some of my viewers and listeners. They're going to tear up the ECHR, they're going to abolish the Human Rights Act, and they're going to turn the boats around in the Channel. Meanwhile, they'll lower taxes to boost the economy, and they will get legal net migration down to the tens of thousands or potentially to zero. Do you object to any of those policies?
Well, I think the problem with all of those, that they are just statements of intent. They're not policies because they don't actually set out how they're going to achieve them. That's the difference between being a potential party of government and being a protest party.
Do you think that whoever wins the Tory leadership is going to have to cooperate in some way with Nigel Farage? Because Reform UK aren't going anywhere, are they?
I think there's a difference between working with other parties in opposition to hold the government to account, as opposed to doing a deal and welcoming Nigel Farage into the Conservative Party. Nigel Farage has spent the best part of 25 years or more trying to destroy the Conservative Party. for me personally, I think it would be unconscionable for him to join us.
Neil, will the winner of the Tory leadership contest be leading the party at the next election? We know that a week is a long time in politics. It could be 4.5 years.
Absolutely. Look, I think what was clear from the last Parliament was the public were fed up with us chopping and changing leader every 5 minutes. And so I'm very clear with my colleagues, I'm very clear with members of the party. This has to be the leader that is taking us into the next general election, and I'm convinced that that leader will become the next Prime Minister of this country.
And Neil, what's the atmosphere like at conference? Is it awake?
Not at all. I think, actually, if you looked at some of the footage from the Labour Party conference last week, that felt less like a celebration and more like a wake. There's, we're building up. It's on a Sunday. There's quite a buzz already around the centre, and I think it's going to be a lot of really interesting conversations taking place over the next few days. And there's a real sense that this is the time for us to renew as a party, and there's a group sense of purpose that we have to work together to do that.
Neil, an absolute delight to have you on the show. Thank you so much for making the time to join us live from Birmingham at Tory Party Conference. Have a good week and a couple of drinks if you've got time as well. My thanks there to Dr. Neil Shastri Hurst, who of course is the Conservative MP for Solihull West and Shirley. Brilliant stuff. What an interesting interview. Well, we've got a very busy hour to come, let me tell you. Anne Widdecombe is waiting in the wings. Lots to talk to Anne about. First of all, do the Tories face possible bankruptcy? There are rumours abound that the leadership candidates are having to demonstrate that they can raise £50,000 just to stay in the race. There were concerns also about sponsorship for this year's party conference. And guess where the money's going? Nigel Farage's Reform UK. So we've heard about an existential crisis politically for the Tories, but what about a financial one? Plus, the rise of the far right in Europe. Why is it happening? Could it happen here? Anne Widdecombe has the answer. Also, folks, in the 10 hour, very important this, we are going to talk about Sir Keir Starmer. Yes, the halo has slipped. Shocking footage of Beth Rigby, of course, a very senior TV political journalist, who said she was basically disturbed by an interview with Keir Starmer. He was absolutely raging. Have we got the clip? Have we got the Beth Rigby clip? Because it's worth hearing. OK, folks, well, let me tell you, we're saving that up for 10 because it's very, very important. We're finding out who Keir Starmer really is. He is our Prime Minister. That's why it matters. So we're debating that in a Take It 10 special. And I've got to say, I've opened the Starmer files. I've been looking into his past, identifying the hypocrisy, the double standards, and it doesn't make for pretty reading. So there you go. Keir Starmer gets the Take a 10 treatment. Anne Widdecombe waiting in the wings, plus the papers. Don't go anywhere.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be turning increasingly unsettled as we go through this evening and overnight. Heavy spells of rain, but something a little bit drier as we go midweek. So we've got an area of low pressure that is going to bring in some strong gusty winds as well as heavy outbreaks of rain. There is a squeeze in those isobars as well. So there is a Met Office wind warning and also a rain warning that comes into force as we go overnight. So heavy spells of rain across southern counties, into Wales and into the Midlands. Cloudier skies are further towards the north, still with some outbreaks of rain here. Lows of generally 10 or 11 degrees. Quite a mild start to Monday morning, but a damp start out there. Heavy spells of rain and still some strong winds, especially along the English Channel. And that heavy spell of rain will continue to push its way northwards, affecting southern parts of England into Wales as well. Northern Ireland also seeing a cloudy start with outbreaks of rain. Rain a bit patchier further the north you go across Scotland, and we may even see some brightness towards the far west. But really a messy picture out there on Monday morning. We have got various weather warnings in force for heavy spells of rain that could lead to disruption and also some flooding. So that rain stalls across northern parts of Wales and across the Midlands into parts of Lincolnshire and Yorkshire as well. Elsewhere, largely cloudy but turning drier towards the far south. Highs of up to 17 or 18 degrees. That low pressure system then moves its way eastwards. We'll still get a keen breeze down the northeast coast with showery outbreaks of rain here. But further the west you go, it should be largely a drier day with some sunny spells in store. And that sets the theme through Wednesday and Thursday, largely drier with some spells of sunshine, highs of up to 18 degrees.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it's 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my take at 10, a top female journalist from television is left uncomfortable after an interview with a raging Prime Minister. It's extraordinary stuff. Take a listen.
He was absolutely furious with me. It was really uncomfortable.
Yes, I'll be lifting the lid on the real Keir Starmer at 10 o'clock. What I've found may shock you. Also tonight, as Reform UK enjoy a flood of donations, are the Conservatives on the verge of going bust? Meanwhile, the rise of the right in Europe. Why is it happening? And will it happen here? I'll be asking the formidable Anne Widdecombe. And for ringside commentary, I'm delighted to welcome former Labour Special Advisor Paul Richards, Editor-at-Large of the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, and political commentator, former political editor, no less, of LBC Radio, Theo Usherwood. Plus, at tomorrow's front pages, a packed show, lots to get through. Sir Keir Starmer, your Prime Minister, unmasked in a Take at 10 special, straight after the news headlines and Sophia Wensler.
Good evening, it's 10 o'clock. I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines on GB News. Now, Rishi Sunak has addressed the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham for the last time as party leader. The former Prime Minister apologised for the general election loss and joked about Sir Keir Starmer's ongoing gifting controversy.
It's such a hot ticket, I'm surprised that Keir Starmer hasn't asked somebody to buy him one. I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you for everything that you do for our party and the support that you've always given Uchtler and me. You all worked tirelessly during the election campaign, and I'm only sorry that I could not deliver the result that your efforts deserved. And as you know, this is my final conference as leader. A new leader of our party will be announced in just 5 weeks' time.
Earlier, the conference kicked off with Tory leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick criticising rival Kemi Badenoch for saying maternity pay is excessive. Mr Jenrick responded to the comments, saying that the party should be firmly on the side of parents. Following the backlash, Ms Badenoch later said on X that, contrary to what some have said, she does support maternity pay. All the leadership hopefuls will be making their case to be the next leader of the party. Some have been speaking at a Conservative Friends of Israel event this evening. Tom Tugendhat said the Conservatives should be absolutely clear that we will always stand with democracies defending themselves, while Robert Jenrick said he would move Britain's embassy in Israel to Jerusalem if he were in power. And James Cleverly said Israel has his personal support in the defence of your democracy. Meanwhile, Israel says it has carried out large-scale airstrikes against Houthi terrorists in Yemen. The latest strikes come as Israel carried out more attacks across Lebanon, and terrorist group Hezbollah fired more rockets into northern Israel. Yesterday, Hezbollah confirmed their leader, Hassan Nasrallah, was killed in airstrikes in southern Lebanon. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel settled the score with Nasrallah's death. Now, back in the UK, a man has been arrested on suspicion of gross negligence manslaughter after an 8-year-old boy was shot dead, and he has now been bailed. Cumbria police said they were called to reports of the boy being injured by a firearm at a farm on Saturday. He was taken to hospital and sadly died overnight, having suffered injuries to his head and face. Officers are continuing to investigate the circumstances of the boy's death. To European politics now, where Austria's right-wing Freedom Party has topped the country's national elections after pledging to close borders and end support for Ukraine. The party, led by Herbert Kickl, has gained the support of 29.1% of electors. That's according to projections. It's led to celebration from right-wing parties across Europe, with France's Marine Le Pen and Germany's Björn Höcke both taking to X to show their support. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Mark.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. A very busy hour. The papers at 10:30 with full pundit reaction, plus Anne Widdecombe waiting in the wings. The rise of the right in Europe, will it happen here? And are the Tory party about to go bust? But first, my take at 10. How about this for a number? Just 17% of the public think that this Labour government are doing a good job. And I'll be honest, I'd love to have a glass of whatever that 17% have been drinking. And the Prime Minister's personal poll ratings have fallen to, wait for it, -30. That makes Prince Andrew look like a national hero. Notwithstanding Sir Keir's terrible policies, taxing us to oblivion, clobbering pensioners and betting the House on flaky renewables, I've been warning about Sir Keir Starmer's dubious character for years, given his support for the truly dangerous Jeremy Corbyn, his efforts to reverse Brexit, his taking of the knee to the woke mob during BLM, his inability to define what a woman is, and, in the absence of compelling data, calling for more of those ruinous COVID lockdowns in order to look prime ministerial. Lockdowns which, in his new book, Unleashed, Boris Johnson today admits didn't work. It's my view that our new Prime Minister is a narcissistic, greedy, thin-skinned, dishonest man posing as somebody honourable. A man who said that he was going to clean up politics, but wound up cleaning up on freebies instead. But I wonder if he's quite sinister too. Let me play you some excerpts of Sky News' brilliant Beth Rigby on the Electoral Dysfunction podcast. Rigby was clearly quite affected by her recent encounter with the Prime Minister when she quite rightly questioned the scale of the freebies sent his way.
He was absolutely furious with me. It was really uncomfortable.
Just let that sink in. This is nice guy Keir Starmer making a top-notch female journalist feel uncomfortable. Let's just hear those words again.
He was absolutely furious with me. It was really uncomfortable.
Wow. Just wow. Rigby, who in my view is always robust but always fair, goes on to explain what exactly happened.
I asked him about claiming all of the freebies in opposition and the tickets and the clothing, etc., and how that looked, and did he think it had undermined his reputation or messaging, and was he sorry about that? He brought up his son. I did not bring it up.
That's exactly right. He brought his own son into this. No one else did, using a 16-year-old boy as a human shield over the donations row. Extraordinary, but that's the measure of the man. It goes on.
Now discussing his family. I don't want to discuss his family.
She doesn't want to discuss his family because she's got ethics and decency. She's a brilliant journalist. But what about her guest? It gets worse. He digs in on the family stuff.
He kept saying, you know, there are human reasons behind that. And I wasn't trying to argue that with him. What I wanted to talk to him was about the bigger point. I didn't want to get into a row about tickets for football or whether he should claim this flat and go and live there with his family. What I was trying to say is, do you understand how it looks when you present yourself as one thing and then you allow a perception to build that you're just like the others?
Well, I've got to say, I think that's a devastating commentary from Sky's Beth Rigby. But look, the guy's got previous. Take a listen to this word salad from Sir Keir, whilst Leader of the Opposition, after being asked what working class means by the brilliant Nick Ferrari on LBC.
Describe yourself as working class. Sir Keir, define working class.
No, working class is families that work for their living, earn their money through going out to work every day, not through other means.
Middle classes do that?
Well, working class families have the ordinary hope to get on in life. I mean, this has been a story.
Middle classes have that?
Yeah, of course they do. Of course they do.
Oh, but working families go to work and they're families and they leave the house and they have a cup of tea. Best comedy sketch I've ever seen. Is the man a fraud? You tell me. Meanwhile, the highly respected barrister Alison Bailey, who served under Starmer when he was a top lawyer, went viral this year with a Twitter thread saying how he intimidated her while she worked under him when he served as a top lawyer. It's quite shocking, actually. On one occasion, she alleges that Starmer stared her down outside of their legal chambers in a chilling episode that stays with her to this day. Does Sir Keir Starmer have a problem with women? Well, you tell me. The outgoing Labour MP, Rosie Duffield, who has just quit the party over what she calls sleaze, nepotism and greed, certainly seems to think so. Starmer reportedly ignored Duffield and offered her no support when she was abused and threatened by Labour Party members for standing up for women's hard-won sex-based rights and pointing out the scientific fact that there are two biological sexes which can't be changed. That, by the way, was her great crime. Now, Starmer was in post when this appalling abuse of Duffield happened unchecked. It was so bad, the abuse, that she actually couldn't attend Labour Party conference for fear of her own safety. And yet, after ignoring her throughout this period, Starmer claimed to be on good terms with Rosie Duffield. Except when asked on Twitter how that was possible when he's refused to meet her or engage with her concerns, Rosie Duffield at the time dryly suggested telepathy. Now, it's my sense that the public have never really liked Sir Keir Starmer. And as the truth begins to emerge of what he's really like, I don't think they ever will. Rumours abound online of far worse to come. Spicy, salacious stuff. I'm sure untrue. I couldn't possibly comment. Either way, very few people will ever vote for this man again. If he's not careful, he'll be out by Christmas. This turkey is about to get a stuffing. I don't think it's ever too early for a Christmas reference. Your reaction to that video, Beth Rigby, what a brilliant journalist. I've got to say, yes, she's a rival, but she's the best in the business. Genuinely disturbed by her encounter with the Prime Minister. All she's doing is asking him questions about the freebies, £110,000 worth, right? Endemic through the party and the shadow cabinet. And yet he's testy with her, furious, raging at being held to account. Look, I'll get your thoughts on the message board, gbnews.com/your say. But first, tonight's top pundits, I'm delighted to welcome former Labour advisor, the one and only Paul Richards. We have editor-at-large of The Mail on Sunday, that is, of course, Charlotte Griffiths, and former political editor of the aforementioned LBC. They're getting far too many plugs tonight. Other radio stations are available. Theo Usherwood. Now, Paul Richards. I've never liked Keir Starmer.
No.
Can you
tell us something we didn't know?
Because I think he's a fraud. I think he's a phony. I think that he's like Boris Johnson. I think he's essentially a sort of a narcissistic self-promoter only interested in power.
I think Boris took more gifts, actually, when he was Prime Minister. But I think you have to judge...
He never called himself a good man, did he?
You have to judge
We knew he was a bounder.
We have to judge Starmer by his results. And the first result was to turn the Labour Party from complete defeat and totally being in the doldrums, in the depths of this anti-Semitism scandal, into an election-winning force that won a landslide just 4 years later. Lots of people like me were saying it couldn't be done. I said it on this show. It couldn't be done, I said, and he's done it. His next test is going to be, can he change the country? And he has to be judged on those deeds as well. And I think a lot of this froth around glasses and, tickets and so on will be long forgotten once he starts to turn around the NHS, class sizes, immigration, crime. And that's how he should be judged.
You know me. If he delivers those things, I will eat my words. It's all about policy. It's all about delivery. But intimidating a senior female television journalist...
Well, I think you've overcooked that a bit, because she only says she felt a bit uncomfortable. I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable now, frankly. It's not a very overheated word, is it? And she's a tough old journalist, isn't she? That's all
she's not that old. She's very graceful.
She's a brilliant journalist. I don't think she was saying, oh, it's awful, I've been intimidated. She said she felt uncomfortable.
I don't know. I mean, Maria, when you get a second, we'll queue up that first line, the first clip of Beth Rigby, and we can look at the tone. Well, I don't. Is it ready yet, Ark? Let me know when it's ready, because I just want our viewers, anyone tuning in, just to sort of have a look at the sentiment of what Beth Rigby is saying. Now, why am I drilling into this so deeply, Charlotte? OK, is it an agenda? No. Am I out to get Keir Starmer? Not at all. What it is I need to know the character of our Prime Minister, because it's going to shape the next 4 years of our lives. I think we've got the clip. So watch this and tell me whether you think she's genuinely threatened. Take a listen.
He was absolutely furious with me. It was really uncomfortable.
It takes a lot to make Beth Rigby say something's uncomfortable, because she is hard as nails. And the interview was savage. He was really quite cross with her on camera. And I think you're right to pick up on the point that he's got an authenticity problem, and his words aren't matching up with his tone and his rhetoric. And he gets under pressure. He gets kind of rude and aggressive with his interviewers because, like any politician, he's weaseling out of things, which is maybe typical of your average politician. But he has always told the world, I'm not one of those people that weasels out of things. I'm Mr. Honourable. I'm such a good guy. But clearly he's not. Under pressure, he will throw his 16-year-old son in front of Beth Rigby as a human shield, just like she said.
Is that a fair accusation?
Well, I think she's made a really good point. She didn't bring up the fact that his child was doing his GCSEs. That was totally irrelevant.
Paul, it was insanity for the Prime Minister to ever mention his own son, wasn't it?
I think he was just telling the truth. That's obviously what happened, and that's what he wanted us to know.
I would conceal the truth, because I wouldn't want to bring my son into the public spotlight.
I always advise politicians, know where the red line is. Either bring your children in...
Boris never mentioned his kids.
Yeah, and some do, some don't. I mean, Obama mentioned them in every speech. Some politicians take a view, and that's fine. I think he was telling the truth, and he's allowed to be robust with journalists. He shouldn't just be a patsy and just let the questions, batter him. If he thinks he should stand up for himself... Could he not just have said
there's a domestic reason why I took the accommodation rather than even
name-checking? Full well, that would just open up even more questions and say, what is that domestic situation?
For me,
what does that
this
mean?
isn't left versus right, Theo. This is about the kind of characters that politics attract. I think there are strong parallels between Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer, that they're both chancers, that they're both essentially, very focused on power, and I would argue sort of almost charlatans to some extent.
I'm going to come up with something slightly different that I think is going on here. I think the problem that Starmer has got is that he's too much of a lawyer. And what he does is that he constructs a legal argument. And in this case, his line is that he hasn't done anything wrong. And if you look at the rules, the parliamentary rules, he hasn't done anything wrong. He's declared everything in line with the rules. And when you look at that interview, and it was a particularly bad-tempered interview on the part of the Prime Minister with when he was questioned by Beth Rigby. I thought Beth Rigby was excellent, by the way, and he didn't handle it well. There is this sort of there's this indignation that he's repeating over and over again, what about the choice? And I've followed the rules and I haven't broken the rules. And he can't stomach what Beth Rigby is putting to him in terms of the way it looks.
OK. Well, listen, the bottom line is, back to me when you can, Ark. The Prime Minister has a mandate to improve the country. He's inherited a mess from the Tories. I wish him good luck in that endeavour, but I've got deep concerns about his character. But I'll give Paul a chance to pick up on that conversation at 10:30. But I've got good news for you now. The weather is turning, the nights are drawing in, and you still have plenty of time to grab an autumn cash boost of an incredible £36,000 in cash. It's the biggest cash prize of the year so far, and it could be yours. Here are the details.
Good luck.
As Reform UK enjoy a flood of donations, are the Conservatives on the verge of going bust? Meanwhile, the rise of the right in Europe. Why is it happening, and will it happen here? I'll be asking Anne Widdecombe next.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The king of breakfast TV is back. That's right, Britain's favourite TV host, Eamon Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast every day from 6 a.m.
Michael Sheen talks about how he was wearing false teeth and wigs and whatever else to play this part. How's it gone down over that side of the pond?
I mean, I have to tell you, I absolutely loved it. I'm seeing everybody else there. They think it's a hoot, but Ben and Anne, it is very funny. And you walk away from it thinking that was great television. But is that appropriate when you think about the fact that it's associated with Jeffrey Epstein? You know, after it was over, I thought, I'm going to say good things about this. But the further I get away from it, the more I think, but what about these women that were violated by Jeffrey Epstein when they turned on the television? Were they laughing? Did they see the humor in it? Or are they horrified that it's become a joke?
The dialogue seemed very stilted and expositional, I thought. But then you think, well, that's clearly what they were trying to achieve. And it wasn't a documentary, it was a drama. And some bits were clearly made up.
Absolutely. I mean, when you watch the princesses crying, when you watch the princesses making decisions behind the scenes, it's very compelling television. And you have to remind yourself, similar to The Crown, that you are watching something based on a true story, but has been greatly exaggerated for entertainment value. And I initially thought, oh, this is horrible for Prince Andrew. And it is. But at the same time, I think that sometimes these pieces make the royal family a little bit more relevant. They introduce new people, and people are now watching them a little more closely. And I think it's a double-edged sword. It can be both things. It can be bad. It can be good for the royal family.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, it's been reported that donors and businesses are turning their backs on the Tories for Nigel Farage's Reform UK. as the party enters its conference with question marks over its finances. Insiders have told the Independent newspaper that a number of red flags have been raised in preparation for the first annual conference since the election defeat in July. In the run-up to conference, it was claimed that the party was still struggling to find a sponsor for its VIP Blue Room, previously sponsored by the retail company Regent Street Group. So, are the Tories in trouble financially? Let's get the views of Anne Widdecombe, former Conservative government minister and now spokesperson for Reform UK. Anne, does it surprise you that the Conservative Party's finances look precarious?
No, not at all. I mean, first of all, that is quite often the case after a major, or in fact, generally it's the case. After a major loss in a general election, the same thing happened to the Tories in 1997. And this time it's exacerbated by the fact that there is an alternative. Businessmen aren't just concerned about, well, you know, if we can't give to the Tories, there's nobody else to give to because we don't want to give to Labour, because they've actually got reform. They've got an alternative. So I imagine it is a bit worse this time. But, you know, on any rational analysis, nobody wants to give to a party that's just lost on a massive scale because of its own internal disorder.
And do you think we need a different model for the financing of political parties? Is state funding a fairer and more democratic solution?
I don't think so. I think, you know, a party has a challenge to appeal to ordinary subscribers and ordinary members. And by the way, Reform is putting on members like, you know, hugely, I'd say. And they have a challenge to appeal to ordinary voters and their little subscriptions. And they have a challenge to appeal to those who have a huge stake in the country's future, like big business and small business. And they won't do that if there's state funding. It'll all be automatic, and there'll always be a row about, you know, what a fair system is. So no, you know, get out there and get the money because what you're saying is right.
And Austria's right-wing Freedom Party is heading for an unprecedented general election victory, with support growing for the AfD in Germany and Marine Le Pen in France. Why is this happening?
I think it's happening because what used to be the right is now almost left of centre. I think that's what's going on, and therefore the right of centre alternative just simply isn't there. And by that I don't mean the far right. I mean, you know, the centre right. It's just not there. And so people are turning to those who say, yes, we can deal with immigration, we can deal with taxation, we can deal with crime, we can deal with the things that are worrying people. And, you know, where they're putting forward policies. I mean, the obvious thing in this country is, you know, that in the last general election, the Conservatives offered Rwanda, Labour offered nothing, Reform offered a 3-point plan.
Yes, now, Anne, some of these Western European parties have their roots in fascism, but is the term far-right helpful when describing these parties? Is it accurate?
Well, that varies from party to party. You know, whether something is far-right, whether it's hard-right, whether it's just simply right. Reform, for example, is right. I think Marine Le Pen is probably now, I mean, I think she used to be to the right of right, but I think she's now probably right. On the other hand, in Austria, yeah, that's pretty hard right. I don't think it matters whether it's useful or not. What people are listening to is not the description. They're looking at what's on offer. That's why Reform in this country is doing so well. Not because it's right of the Conservatives, but because of what's on offer. That's what's going to determine future electoral success.
Do you think that the UK could see a resurgence or a renaissance of the far right in this country politically? Not that we've got much of a history of that to speak of.
No, I don't think you're going to find the far right, but I think what you will get is a renaissance of centre-right, which, as I say, is not represented now by the Conservatives. It used to be. And it is on offer from Reform.
Now, Anne, you spoke very well at Reform UK's party conference last weekend. And, of course, you're a veteran of decades of Tory party conference, often in Brighton, at the Grand Hotel and elsewhere. Are you a fan of conference season? Have you been one to throw yourself into the festivities?
Oh, I used to love conference season when the Conservative Party went to the seaside and we had 4 days. And in those days, we could all put in motions criticising the government, or if they were the opposition didn't matter. We could do all that and it would be printed in the party's handbook. Nobody shrank away from it. It was lively. It was fun. We all enjoyed ourselves. When I was younger, I used to stay in the bar at the Grand till 3 a.m, almost caught the bomb by doing that. And it was enormous fun. Now, the Reform Conference was fun. Yes, it's 2 days, not 4 days. No, it wasn't by the seaside. But it was fun and it was vibrant and we all knew where we were going and it was packed. It was packed. We had over 4,000 people there.
I'm amazed that Margaret Thatcher didn't come down at 3 a.m. in her nightgown and pack you off to bed, Anne, you naughty girl.
No, but I left the hotel at 20 to 3 and the bomb went off, I think, at 3.
Oh, blimey. Well, that's another story, isn't it? And listen, an absolute delight as always. We'll see you in a week's time. It's always the highlight of Mark Dolan tonight on a Sunday to hear from former government minister, broadcaster, author, you name it, television personality, the wonderful Anne Widdecombe. OK, folks, tomorrow's paper's next. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be turning increasingly unsettled as we go through this evening and overnight. Heavy spells of rain, but something a little bit drier as we go midweek. So we've got an area of low pressure that is going to bring in some strong gusty winds as well as heavy outbreaks of rain. There is a squeeze in those isobars as well. So there is a Met Office wind warning and also a rain warning that comes into force as we go overnight. So heavy spells of rain across southern counties into Wales and into the Midlands. Cloudier skies further towards the north, still with some outbreaks of rain here. Lows of generally 10 or 11 degrees. Quite a mild start to Monday morning, but a damp start out there. Heavy spells of rain and still some strong winds, especially along the English Channel. And that heavy spell of rain will continue to push its way northwards, affecting southern parts of England into Wales as well. Northern Ireland also seeing a cloudy start with outbreaks of rain. Rain a bit patchier further the north you go across Scotland, and we may even see some brightness towards the far west. But really a messy picture out there on Monday morning. We have got various weather warnings in force for heavy spells of rain that could lead to disruption and also some flooding. So that rain stalls across northern parts of Wales and across the Midlands into parts of Lincolnshire and Yorkshire as well. Elsewhere, largely cloudy but turning drier towards the far south. Highs of up to 17 or 18 degrees. That low pressure system then moves its way eastwards. We'll still get a keen breeze down the northeast coast with showery outbreaks of rain here, but further the west you go, it should be largely a drier day with some sunny spells in store, and that sets the theme through Wednesday and Thursday, largely drier with some spells of sunshine, highs of up to 18 degrees.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Just gone 10:30, tomorrow's front pages. And let's have a look at the Metro, please, if we can, Ark. And we have Israel's onslaught. Hezbollah chief's body found as group confirms 7 leaders died in hit on HQ. Shock figures revealed. Fight serial drink drive epidemic. Hundreds of motorists have been caught drink driving at least 4 times, with a group of hardcore offenders banned on 7 separate occasions. I thought we'd seen the back of drink driving, but it would seem not. OK, should we go to the Daily Star next? Always a moment of levity with the Star. Amanita Phalloids exclusive. Invasion of the killer fungi, dead man's fingers and death cap mushrooms surge across Britain. Now, this is all we need, right? We've got enough problems, Charlotte, without finding out that killer death cap and dead man's fingers mushrooms are booming across Britain due to the washout autumn. So do not be picking any mushrooms when you go out for your autumnal walk. The Independent now. Tory rivals turn on Kemi Badenoch over excessive maternity pay remarks. The leadership contender suggested statutory wages for new mothers were too great a burden on firms. Also, Starmer fights sleaze claims with tighter rules on donor freebies. So Keir Starmer has launched a fight back against accusations that his government is mired in sleaze, with an announcement that the rules on declaring donations and gifts are to be changed. The PM and a succession of cabinet colleagues have been criticised for accepting thousands of pounds worth of freebies from corporate sponsors and donors. But Cabinet Office head Pat McFadden said the current rules are a Tory loophole that will now be closed. Daily Express. Labour threat to armed forces comes at worst possible time, and cold payment policy would result in 262,000 older people needing medical treatment. Cruel winter fuel cuts will cost NHS £160 million per year. The Iron newspaper. Tory rivals turn on Badenoch over excessive maternity pay row. North's biggest train firm performing worse under public ownership. And Israel targets Iranian weapons network in Yemen after wiping out Hezbollah leaders. Daily Mail now. Charlotte's paper, or sister paper, I should say. Political memoir of the century. Boris Macron wanted punishment beating for Britain over Brexit. Boris Johnson suspected Emmanuel Macron, the French president, was weaponising the small boats crisis to undermine Brexit. In his sensational memoir, the former Prime Minister says Mr Macron was determined to give the UK a punishment beating. Sun newspaper now. Kemi in row on mum pay, and Annie tells Kyle, give me £15 million to stay. I don't know who she is, don't know who Annie is or Kyle is, but I'm sure she's worth every penny. The Times now. Tory rivals trade barbs over excessive burden of maternity pay, and Israeli tanks at border as Lebanon braces for battle. Also, pro-Russian pro-Russian hard-right party set to lead Austria. OK, those are your front pages. For reaction, I'm delighted to welcome editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths, political commentator and former political editor of LBC Radio, Theo Usherwood, and former senior Labour special advisor Paul Richards. Lots to sink our teeth into there. Let's have a look at this serial drink drive epidemic, Paul. That's a real concern. I thought drink driving had gone out with sort of power suits and big hair in the 80s.
Yeah, it's really worrying, isn't it? I mean, the suggestion is that it's on the increase and people are doing it again and again and again, and it rather suggests that the system for preventing it or deterring it or punishing it isn't working.
Definitely. And my other concern in 2024, Theo, is drug driving, which is harder to detect but very common.
Yes, I think it's actually, from my understanding, this actually goes back to austerity in the, when the coalition came to power, and they were looking at, and they started to cut, Cameron and Osborne started to cut the police forces right across the country. Of course, Boris Johnson put the numbers up again. But the teams that got targeted were road traffic teams. And so what's happened is that rather than having the clampdown that we saw, and as you talk about in the 80s, 90s, that we saw in that period, a generation ago, where drink driving, drug driving, but particularly drink driving back then, went from being something that people did to being an absolute taboo. And so you had the public campaigns, but you also had, police working very hard to stamp it out by breathalyzing people. Of course, over the course of the last 15 years, those checks have gone down because there haven't been the police officers on the road to carry out those checks, from my understanding, and that's why we've seen it come back. And of course, we haven't had the public campaigns, we haven't had those adverts at Christmas. They're often very graphic, weren't they, those adverts at Christmas, talking about the effects of drink driving and drug driving. So it's not good to see, but I'm not surprised.
Meanwhile, you get 6 points for so much as looking at your phone or driving at 21 miles an hour.
I know, I've had, since the 20 miles per hour thing, I've had so many speeding tickets, it's maddening. But I'm not a big one for nanny statism.
Are you the Mail on Sunday's Lewis Hamilton?
No, I'm doing 21 miles per hour.
You put the pedal
mostly
to the metal.
It's this 20 mile per hour thing.
It's impossible to drive that slowly, isn't it?
Yeah, I've got the auto function now on my speedometer in my car.
Oh, look at you.
There, I know.
My 14-year-old Prius doesn't have that button. I've got a mate with a Triumph motorbike. It's a vintage thing. It's very heavy. It's so heavy that he can't use it anymore because if he goes below 20 miles an hour, it falls over.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, he's absolutely screwed in London then. He's got no chance.
But it's definitely a concern, and this is about people's lives, isn't it?
It is. I'm not into nanny statism. Keir Starmer is, but I do kind of think that we should have a zero tolerance alcohol approach, because after that first drink, you get a bit confused. Have I had enough? Am I over the limit? Nobody knows how big a unit is, So I think if you say it's 0 drinks, not 1.5 pints or 1 pint.
There you go. You heard it first.
Yeah, Paul, you're a teetotaler. Your body's a temple.
I am,
which is why you're
and
on the picture of health. There's an issue with it being an offence to go over 0%, isn't there? What if you're on medication and even some food contains alcohol?
Well, the law can be constructed in such a way to take that into account, but I think that the issue is, especially with these measures, and you don't know how much necessarily alcohol there is in a beer and all these things, it's very difficult to tell. And I think there should be zero tolerance because it really is a serious matter and people are obviously getting into trouble and very dangerous as well. I can remember in the 1970s being bundled into the back of a car as a child with, half-cut drivers back from drinks parties or the pub or whatever. Yeah. Thank God those days are gone. The road deaths in those days were huge.
Right. I've got relatives that were rarely sober throughout the 80s, including behind the wheel of a car.
My parents had a rule that if it was the countryside, it didn't count, which doesn't make any sense.
It makes it even worse, isn't it? Yeah,
windy roads. All right, look at you. You're a model. You are, and you're a model citizen.
Well, we're the ones who survived it, though, aren't we? We are the ones who survived the 70s, but a lot of people didn't.
No, that's exactly right. And when it went wrong, it was pretty nasty, wasn't it? Speaking of nasty, Theo, cruel winter fuel cuts will cost NHS £169 million a year. What is the long-term political damage from this cut to pensioners' support this winter?
So this is a front-page exclusive for the Daily Express, and they've got some modelling from the End Fuel Poverty Coalition, and it estimates that 262,000 pensioners are going to need NHS treatment at a cost of £169 million to the taxpayer as a result. I think what's interesting about this particular aspect of the story is that Labour in government haven't done any modelling or been prepared to publish any modelling from the decision to cut winter fuel payments to 10 million pensioners. They did do some modelling as it happened back in 2017 when Theresa May's government was going to do it. And, of course, energy prices were substantially lower then, and they found that 4,000 pensioners would die. And, of course, I think part of the problem for the Conservatives is because they've got this leadership contest going on, they're in complete disarray, and they haven't been able to do any of their own, they haven't been able to run a particularly decent opposition campaign to this decision, which is going to affect millions of pensioners. I wonder whether, we head now towards, we've got a month until the budget tomorrow. I wonder whether there will be, and of course there's been some sounding off about changing the borrowing rules, which would, of course, that would have to be capital investment, but then you've got this extra £10 billion potentially as well going into the Exchequer from some changes to the way the Bank of England that weren't anticipated. So I wonder whether actually there will be now some headroom for Rachel Reeves to make the changes and actually reverse this particular cut.
OK, well, listen, we've got lots more to come. A fascinating headline in the Independent newspaper. Starmer fights sleaze claims with tighter rules on donor freebies. So Labour have had the freebies, now they're going to create rules to stop the freebies. Isn't that Labour marking their own homework and policing their own rules? Also, let me tell you that my pundits are split on this because I've got Theo Usherwood, who has just said on air that he doesn't think that Labour can carry on like this, with Keir Starmer limping from one political crisis to another, and Paul Richards disagrees. Charlotte's in the middle. We'll debate that next.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Well, the first thing on in my mind when I heard about this is, what has this country come to when we're talking about getting kids as young as 6 years old to be jabbed weekly or however often it is, because they are too fat? Where are the parents in all of this? There's three things actually here that are important. Number one is we do not know the long-term consequences of these jabs. So if I had a child and I was going to let them have the jab, I would be feeling like I'm treating them like a lab rat, to be quite honest with you, because we don't know the long-term consequences. Secondly, the manufacturers are clear that some of the potential side effects can be very serious. We're talking about potentially pancreatitis, let's get my word out, and also it lists as a potential side effect thyroid cancer. Arguably, it's called the gamble jab, to be honest with you, because of these potential side effects at the moment. And then thirdly, I come back to the parents. Where are the parents in all of this? Because they are the role models. So it really is about parenting, and it's about parenting from being a role model yourself in terms of being slim and healthy, and not expecting a jab to take your place and other people to take your place. If you have children, they are your responsibility. Think before you breed. The other thing you need to remember with this is, when you stop taking that jab, it is highly likely that you're going to put all the weight back on. Now, the thought of a child of 6 years of age, starting with that jab, conditioning them mentally to live with that jab, as far as I'm concerned, is absolutely not on.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, folks, let's have a look at this headline in The Independent, if we can. Starmer fights sleaze claims with tighter rules on donor freebies. I mean, I've got to say, Charlotte, you've got to laugh, haven't you? It was Labour that have been guilty of accepting all these freebies, but now they're going to be really strict to make sure it doesn't happen ever again under any government.
I love they call it a Tory loophole. It's another thing they can blame on the Tories. He's been clobbering this rules argument all along, and that was the problem with the Beth Rigby show, is that, it wasn't about the rules, it was about the optics, and he just didn't get that at all. He was like, no, we went along with the rules. Anyway, so now he's changing the rules, so finally he'll understand the issue, hopefully.
Yes, you have
the rules.
You have to. Well, look, we've had several quite sparky conversations tonight, including your perception, your belief that potentially Reform UK have peaked. What about the longevity of Keir Starmer? Because in the Red Ring, we've got Paul Richards, who's very committed to Starmer, thinks he's got a strong mandate and has transformed the party, that he'll be here at the next election. Theo Usherwood, on current form, that's not going to happen. What do you think? I think the fact that sleaze has come up so early on in his premiership is
highly embarrassing because, of course, his whole, raison d'etre is being the anti-sleaze Prime Minister. So if it carries on like this, if he gets these sort of accusations for another 5 years, it just doesn't bode well.
But isn't this a case of, getting that sort of dirty laundry sorted out early doors? Don't we just dispense, you're in the media, you're the sort of head honcho at the Mail on Sunday, and you know that tomorrow's papers are what is it, fish and chip wrapping.
There will be the next scandal. There will be, and he might wriggle out of this,
but
especially if he closes the loophole.
This freebie story is going to stop at some point, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm actually quite surprised it's gone on quite so long with so much, intensity, because it does feel like something he's going to ride out. I mean, the feeling is he's going to ride this out. He's not going to have to resign, is he? So I'm quite amazed that it's had so much, column inches, frankly.
Well, Theo, it is a self-inflicted crisis that has befallen the Prime Minister. Does that mean that he'll learn from this, move on, regroup and build?
So the front page of The Independent, Starmer fights sleaze claims with tighter rules on donor freebies. This is the right response. It should have happened 3 weeks ago. And I think the problem is that rather than actually getting on top of the problem, recognising the way it looked, as Charlotte was saying, rather than going into that interview with Beth Rigby, and there have been other opportunities as well which he's missed to actually just draw a line under this by recognising there's a particular problem and dealing with it. And there's always been some, I think, sort of suggestion from Number 10 or suggestion from Keir Starmer in the way that he's answered questions that he all thinks it's terribly unfair and it's just because he's a Labour Prime Minister and it's not, and it's the media that's to blame for this story. Recognising there's a problem, particularly around this issue of hypocrisy, the fact that he campaigned on one thing and now he's in office, he's pretending, he's pretending the rules don't necessarily apply to him. There is a difference. Let's acknowledge it. There is a difference between what Keir Starmer has done and Boris Johnson. It's not that that's causing the problem. It's this idea that he went into that election promising to clean up politics, and now that he's in government until this front page that we see in The Independent, that he's actually prepared to do it if he's in the firing line.
Well, there you go.
That's a particular issue. And to our conversation earlier, just final point, Mark, is that you can't go into government. It's just sapping. If he's going into government, he's got this crisis, and if he's not prepared to just, get his machine working as it should do, to deal with these stories early and to get so that he can do all the other things that he wants to do, then if you were to have this perpetual, negative headlines day after day, it will stop him from doing all the other things.
Do you think that Keir Starmer is his reputation soiled? Has his copybook been blotted by this?
I defy anyone to tell me what he's actually done wrong. He's done nothing illegal, and he's abided by and if you don't like that, then you change the rules, which is for now what he's doing.
He's accepted too many corporate gifts,
they're not corporate
demonstrating
gifts.
Greed.
No, I don't think that's fair. I think he's taken gifts within the system, and some of them came from Lord Ali, who is a very close friend. And if we have discussed anything, if a friend offers you a gift, would you shove it back in their face? I don't think so. If I was a rich man like Keir Starmer, I wouldn't accept any gifts. Well,
he's got to be a millionaire, hasn't he, as a former top lawyer?
I've no idea, but I mean, and certainly on the Arsenal tickets, that's about national security, and it's about actually saving the taxpayer money. You put the question to Anne Widdecombe: do you want the taxpayer funding this stuff instead? She said no, quite rightly, and I think most people would agree with that. So anyway, if you don't like the system, he's saying, OK, I'm going to change the system. You can't have it both ways of that. You can't say on the one hand, he's a terrible man for accepting some free glasses, and then on the other hand saying, oh, we shouldn't be changing the system.
Charlotte?
Can I say, I've got one or two rich friends, OK? They would never offer me a free stuff. They just
for Christmas or something, they wouldn't give you a gift.
The reason that he's been offered stuff is because it's not, Ali wants something in return.
No, he doesn't. That's so unfair. He doesn't want it. We've got nothing we can give Lord Ali.
Even if you never prove it, of course, there's something to do with the power that
he was granted an access to all areas past
Well, just so he could help doing whatever he was doing, organising a party.
He doesn't have a political role, and that pass has been rescinded.
He can go into Downing Street anytime he wants. He's a member of the House of Lords. He's got 200 million. The Labour Party's got literally nothing it can give Lord Ali. Everything he gives to his friends in the party is because he's their friend.
Also,
simple as that.
Pride. If somebody offered me £32,000,
one moment, Theo.
My pride would get in the way. I wouldn't accept free stuff from my mates.
Theo. Paul's putting forward this Wes Streeting argument that somehow people give to politicians like they give to animal charities. It's absolutely nonsense. People give to political parties because they're not doing it just out of the goodness of their heart. And there's a second part to this story that hasn't been...
I really believe that he's doing it from the goodness of his heart.
There's a second part to this story. There's a second part to this story where we've got huge amounts of, we've got gifts, whether it be tickets or so forth, and it hasn't been explored about what people have got in return, and that's problematic. And if we're going to clean up politics, we need to take the gifts, the tickets, everything out, so there is much greater, politicians should be there for public service. Keir Starmer said he was going to be there for public service, regardless of all the free clothes.
Setting aside freebies, do you think that this is going to keep happening to Keir Starmer? Has he got a political glass jaw? Has he got a mistake in him, Theo Usherwood, which means that these gaffes are going to keep on coming in different shapes and forms?
I think there are enough people around him who are smart enough that they can. I think they've got the ability within the top team within Labour and Keir Starmer as well to turn it around.
But is he like Kamala Harris? Are they going to have to keep interviewers away from him?
But I think you're right to point out, where I would agree with you, Mark, is I think there is a danger that they could slip into that place where they're just not getting it. And if they do that, then I just think it's going to be very difficult for them to get their agenda done. And if they want to succeed and they want to keep Nigel Farage out and the Tories at bay, then they need to deliver.
Paul, Keir Starmer, does he win the next election?
I think the greatest hypocrisy is journalists who are renowned for the amount of freebies that they accept. I mean, freebies of trips and meals and all kinds of free stuff all the time.
I can tell you that everything Charlotte and I are wearing tonight is rented.
And now accusing politicians of something on a much less big scale. I just think it's absolute rank hypocrisy.
Charlotte,
so let's close that. Again, if you don't like it, close it down. That's what he's doing.
Charlotte, loved having you on the show. I hope you'll come back. A couple of seconds on Kemi Badenoch. Hot water saying maternity pay is too high for companies.
I'm shocked by this. Maternity pay is £500 a month. It's nothing. I've had 3 children, and statutory maternity pay doesn't get you anywhere. Honestly, it does not last a month. £500. It really
doesn't touch the sides. Listen, loved all of your company tonight. Theo Usherwood, Paul Richards, Charlotte Griffiths. What a brilliant, brilliant evening it's been. And why? Because of your company. Thank you for watching and listening. Well done to the team. I'll see you Friday at 8. Headliners is next.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be turning increasingly unsettled as we go through this evening and overnight. Heavy spells of rain, but something a little bit drier as we go midweek. So we've got an area of low pressure that is going to bring in some strong gusty winds as well as heavy outbreaks of rain. There is a squeeze in those isobars as well. So there is a Met Office wind warning and also a rain warning that comes into force as we go overnight. So heavy spells of rain across southern counties into Wales and into the Midlands. Cloudier skies are further towards the north, still with some outbreaks of rain here. Lows of generally 10 or 11 degrees. Quite a mild start to Monday morning, but a damp start out there. Heavy spells of rain and still some strong winds, especially along the English Channel. And that heavy spell of rain will continue to push its way northwards, affecting southern parts of England into Wales as well. Northern Ireland also seeing a cloudy start with outbreaks of rain. Rain a bit patchier further the north you go across Scotland, and we may even see some brightness towards the far west. But really a messy picture out there on Monday morning. We have got various weather warnings in force for heavy spells of rain that could lead to disruption and also some flooding. So that rain stalls across northern parts of Wales and across the Midlands into parts of Lincolnshire and Yorkshire as well. Elsewhere, largely cloudy but turning drier towards the far south. Highs of up to 17 or 18 degrees. That low pressure system then moves its way eastwards. We'll still get a keen breeze down the northeast coast with showery outbreaks of rain here, but further the west you go, it should be largely a drier day with some sunny spells in store, and that sets the theme through Wednesday and Thursday, largely drier with some spells of sunshine, highs of up to 18 degrees.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Luck. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
True crime is everywhere.
Yeah, next weekend, CrimeCon UK takes place in London, And joining us now to tell us more about that event and the true crime phenomena is former detective Stephen. How do you pronounce your surname? Keogh. Sorry, Stephen.
That's all right,
I should have checked you before.
No worries.
And Nancy, and again, Nancy, what's your surname?
Bourne.
Bourne, thank you. I'm showing my ignorance there, but thank you both for joining us. So, Stephen, you're a former top cop. Hope you don't mind me describing you as that. At CrimeCon and other events like that, do you get into sort of the semantics of the investigations and, you know, how, for example, how I was watching something the other night where somebody was unfortunately murdered, but you saw the crime scene investigators trying to work out from which side the person was attacked from. Did the knife come from the left-hand side or the right-hand side? Is it all that kind of stuff?
So for me, everything I've done since I've left the police is about sharing that knowledge of investigations, because if you watch TV, they get it wrong a lot. So what we try and do, I'm not the only police officer there, there's experts, there's forensic scientists, psychologists, all from that investigative world. Just trying to get across, well, actually, this is how it's really done. This is what we do, not what you're going to see on telly. And I think that's really important. So for me personally, coming along to CrimeCon, I just look at the list of people that are there, honestly, and I'm proud to be associated with them. There are some fascinating people there. People who've really fought for justice for their children. People who are campaigning for victims, for survivors. So it's an event that. When you look at the name, you might think, oh, they're just going to sit there talking about serial killers and what they got up to. Couldn't be further from the truth. It's really about what goes on, how it impacts the victims, how the investigations are carried out. It's educational as much as anything.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wenslow with your headlines at 11 o'clock. Rishi Sunak has addressed the Conservative Party conference for the last time as party leader. The former Prime Minister apologised for the general election loss and joked about Sir Keir Starmer's ongoing gifting controversy.
It's such a hot ticket, I'm surprised that Keir Starmer hasn't asked somebody to buy him one. Now, I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you for everything that you do for our party and the support that you've always given Upster and me. You all worked tirelessly during the election campaign, and I'm only sorry that I could not deliver the result that your efforts deserved. And as you know, this is my final conference as leader. A new leader of our party will be announced in just 5 weeks' time.
Earlier, the conference kicked off with Tory leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick criticising rival Kemi Badenoch for saying maternity pay is excessive. Mr Jenrick responded to the